Hey there, I'm Olivia Savannah here from Olivia's Catastrophe, and today I'm here to give you an unhaul. I'm going to be unhauling 35 books. What I did was I sorted through my TBR stack and pulled off some of the books that I am not that interested in reading anymore. I've been in the book community, online book community, since I was 13 and I'm now 22, so my reading tastes have definitely changed a lot from back in the day, and I'm kind of unhauling some of the older books on my TBR or later ones that I've just not any interest in because my reading taste has changed, and I've also got some books that I've read and didn't like enough to want to keep on my shelves. So let's get right down to the books. Let's start hard and fast with A Court of Thorns and Roses and A Court of Mist and Fury and A Court of Wings and Ruin. I am getting rid of the Ekatar series because I just have to admit I'm not the biggest fan. I read the first one and I didn't really like it. I was very much bored throughout this book, but I put that down to the Beauty and the Beast fairy tale, which I find quite a boring fairy tale rather than it being the book's fault itself. And then I read the second one, and at the time that I read it I thought it was okay. You know, it's got a lot of steamy scenes, but unfortunately the more that time passes the more I realise I'm just not as invested in this world and these characters as some other people. And I've also found out that the fae dark romance genre is not really one for me. I'm not that interested in, you know, flying through the sky and having sex and wrecking beds, and because of all that hard sex that you're having, I'm just not a big fan of it. And I couldn't care less. I don't really like the romance, I don't really like the main character, and every time I thought about picking up A Court of Wings and Ruin, which is the only one I haven't read, I was just filled with an idea of dread. I don't want to do it, I don't want to pick it up, and if that's on my TBR then why should it be there? So I'm getting rid of this whole trilogy. I think other people will appreciate being able to get these books better than them fermenting on my shelves and never being read again. We are going to continue with some other fantasy books. I have The Gilded Ones by Namina Forna. This is an art copy that I won in a giveaway. I read this back in January as a buddy read with Lena from Lena Reads, and I just thought this book was okay. I didn't love it, I didn't hate it, but I've since seen reviews of people who have enjoyed this book a lot more than I did, and I think they could be better off with an art copy of this than me, who's holding on to it and not doing anything with it. Well, not really holding on to it. It's January, so you know, this is a fairly recent unhaul. But yeah, I thought that I was not a big fan of the big training montage. That's not my favourite thing in fantasy books, but I know other people do like that, and there were just things about the plot that didn't interest me. I was able to predict some things. I'm not going to be continuing the series, so there's no point holding on to the first one. More books where I'm not going to be continuing the series. I have Rhapsodic by Laura Thalassa, and I read this one in 2018, so it has been a hot minute. When I read this one I did like it. I feel like it's very, very similar to A Court of Thorns and Roses, and if you like that one you might like this one, and I like this more than A Court of Thorns and Roses. I actually read this the same month I read Akamath, and I've since read some reviews about the troublesome elements of the romance, but ever since I finished this one I haven't felt a need to reach for the sequel. And again, my reading tastes have changed since then, and I realised I'm not a fan of dark fae romance, so I'm going to get rid of it. Somebody else might enjoy this more, and I'm not going to be picking up the sequel. I also read An Ember in the Ashes earlier this year, not quite sure of the month anymore, and I thought it was just an okay fantasy. I really wanted to love this one more than I did. I definitely felt like this was closer to a dystopian than a fantasy, which quite shocked me because I was expecting more magical elements, and that may happen later down the line in the series, but I wasn't as intrigued enough by the characters and the plot to want to continue with this book series, so I'm not going to, and I'm going to be unhauling the first one. And now for something that's quite exciting. If you've ever watched my Let's Talk DNFs where I did the DNF tag, you know that I can count on two hands the amount of books that I've ever DNF'd, and I'm going to be adding 2 books to that DNF stack. There's 2 more books that I've just decided to give up on and DNF, and I think I can still count how many books I've ever DNF'd on 2 hands, so I've still got work to do when it comes to DNFing more, but I'm going to unhaul the ones that I've DNF'd, obviously. So the first one is Gone Girl by Gillian Flynn. I made it 100 pages in, but I do not like these characters and I cannot stand this book, and I'm just not invested, I'm not interested. I do want to know what the plot twist is because some people say the plot twist is amazing, but thankfully we have a film and might be more enjoyable as well. So I still haven't given the film a go yet, but I very much plan to, and I look forward to doing so. And then I also have Northwest by Zadie Smith. I tried to read this one in a buddy read last year and we both got halfway and we both DNF'd it. Well, she DNF'd it there and then, but I put it on pause thinking I was going to get back to it. It's been months. I haven't got back to it, and every time I think about getting back to it, I'm just like, no. So if I'm feeling that way, I've just decided to go ahead and DNF it. In fact, I have read now 1.5 of Zadie Smith's books, and I can just tell that Zadie Smith's writing style isn't for me. However, I was very much convinced I was going to like her works, and I have quite a few of them that I picked up secondhand, so those will also be going. And those are White Teeth by Zadie Smith, which I've heard is her best, but also I'm not interested enough to read it, and On Beauty, which I've read a little bit of just to see if I wanted to try a third Zadie Smith. I usually try and do 3 books and you're out for an author, but I just read some snippets of this and I also don't think I'm gonna really like it, so me and Zadie Smith don't get along in terms of literary enjoyment, unfortunately. So now we've got Soulbinder by Sebastien de Castell. I got this at a bookish event and it's actually signed to me. It's a hardcover. It's beautiful. But I have read the first book in the Spellslinger series and I just thought it was an okay book, and I don't feel a need to continue with the series, so I don't think I'm going to be reading further. I've recently been DNFing series much more harshly. If the first book doesn't captivate me, I'm not going to be continuing. The first book in this one didn't captivate me, and this was the 4th book. I got it for free at the event, so I was thinking, you know, if I get to the 4th book I'll already have a copy, but I don't think I'm gonna get there because I'm not interested enough. Life of Pi, which I won in a giveaway a very, very long time ago, back in my blogger days where I didn't have a bookstagram and I didn't have a booktube yet. I just had my book blog, so that's quite a while ago. I was quite young then, and I think the film had come out recently or is about to come out or something like that, and I was excited to read this one, but over time I've seen a lot of negative reviews saying that this one is quite boring and it's much more worth your time to just watch the film, but I'm also not that interested in watching the film, so I don't think this is going to be a book for me anymore, and I'm just going to unhaul it and pass it along. Purple Hibiscus by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. I have read 2 of Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie's novels, one of which I thought was okay and one of which I actually really liked and learned a lot from, but she's recently come out as anti-trans and said some things that I disagree with, and this was the one that was left on my TBR. It's also the one that I had the least interest in out of her 3, maybe she has 4 books that are novels out now, I'm not entirely sure, but yeah, I'm not going to be reading it anytime, so I'm going to get rid of it. Red Queen by Victoria Aveyard. I bought this on recommendation of a friend before I realised that me and my friend have very different reading tastes, and I don't think it's going to be my kind of read whatsoever. The more I look into reviews of it, the more I think it's just not my cup of tea, which is a shame, but I'm just going to pass this one along. I'm not very interested in this series. And we have The Iron Knight by Julie Kagawa, and this one I bought a very, very long time ago, again when I was a teenager, and I was very interested in starting this series. I'm unfortunately less interested in starting this series now, but I made a mistake. I thought this was the first book in the series and it's not. I think it's the 3rd or the 4th or something like that, and you know, I just don't need to keep it if I'm not going to pick up this series and I'm not going to get to this far in. We have World After by Susan E, and this is the 2nd book in the Angelful series, which is a post-apocalyptic angel fantasy series, and I read the first one and I really enjoyed the first one. It's very much a throwback to early young adult literature. You know, there's like shirtless guys and there's lots of like eye contact and subtle flirting, and it was a lot of fun. But then I read this one and I was quite disappointed in the sequel. I feel like it very much goes a bit too weird and wacky and a bit far off from the first one, and also the couple that I was shipping spent so much time apart that I was just not invested in the storyline. I've also heard that the 3rd one is more like the 2nd than the 1st, so I've decided to DNF the trilogy here, and while I am keeping the 1st book just for, you know, memories and enjoyment's sake, I'm gonna just get rid of this 2nd book and pretend it's a standalone. Early YA that I got when I was a teenager, when that was more my thing, but now I'm not interested in it. So we have Wicked Lovely by Melissa Marr and Alienated by Melissa Landers. Oh, they're both Melissas. I didn't know that when I picked them up, but they're both Melissas. And this one is an alien romance, and this one I think is a fae romance again. Yeah, not really my thing these days, so I'm just gonna unhaul these 2. The Once and Future Queen by Clara O'Connor. This is an art copy that I read for review earlier this year, and unfortunately I didn't like this one. It was still quite enjoyable to read even though I didn't like it, because I had a laugh with the dramaticness of the romance and the love triangle, but the world building was very confusing and didn't make any sense, and the way we were given information was just really weird. Our main character didn't really have a consistency. Sometimes she was spoiled, sometimes she was smart, and I just didn't, I mean, you can be both, but I just feel like she voyeured between the two rather than sticking to, I don't know, a concrete personality, which I struggled with. It was very obvious who was going to win out in this love triangle, but one thing I will say is that the plot was really, you know, it was always going. Things happened and they went wrong, things happened and they went wrong, and I wasn't able to predict anything in the slightest, so this book definitely had that going for it. We've got some more books that I read and don't feel a need to hold on to. So we have The God of Small Things by Arundhati Roy. I've read some of Arundhati Roy's essays and I think I liked her essays more than her book. However, I do think this book is very important. It's kind of a bestseller around the world, but it's also very important to the South Asian community, and I've been very much interested in reading books that are, you know, very culturally important to different cultures than my own and different nations than my own, which is why I picked this one up originally. And I learned a lot about the caste system that I didn't know before, so I very much appreciated it, but it is fictional and Arundhati Roy's writing is absolutely beautiful. I wouldn't say I just liked this book, it just wasn't the perfect book for my personal reading taste. But I'm just going to pass it along, not because I hated it and therefore I need to unhaul it, but I'm also not really holding on to books that I just find okay anymore. I'm really not that, I feel like I want to say I'm not that possessive of my book collection anymore. You can pry my hands off of my 5-star and 4-star reads, they're not going anywhere. The Shock of the Fall by Nathan Filer. This was another buddy read that I did with Samantha's books, and we both had this book on our TBR for a very long time, so we decided to read it together and just kick it off our TBR, which we did, and unfortunately we didn't really love it. For a lot of the time I was confused at what was going on, and I feel like it did the grand reveal a little bit too late for it to have much of an impact. The ending was nice, but I feel like a book needs more than a very good ending to be a good book, so I'm happy enough to get rid of this one. Raya Rose by Jana Oliver, which is a Sleeping Beauty retelling, and this is one that I was doubting of whether I want to pass on it or not, because I do like fairy tale retellings, but I just decided to let this one go in the end. And that's it, really. I got this one a very long time ago. I think I won it in a giveaway or something. Passing it along. Then we have A Mercy by Toni Morrison, and I actually read this one last month. You'll see quite a few of the books that I read last month and didn't like, and this is one that I did like. I'm not going to repeat myself. If you want to watch any of my 30 books in 30 days vlog, talk about some of the books I read last month and didn't like in a lot more detail. I do like Toni Morrison. This just wasn't the Toni Morrison for me, and while I do want to read my way through Toni Morrison's backlist of books, I'm not going to keep every single one. I'll have a nice decent Morrison collection, I think, of ones that I like. I don't need to just have them all for the sake of having them all. A Movable Feast by Ernest Hemingway. I won this one in a giveaway, but throughout my 4 years of uni I've had to read quite a few short stories that were written by Ernest Hemingway, and I didn't like a single one of his short stories, which does not bode well for the idea of me diving into one of his novels. Maybe his long form writing is better than his short form, but I don't actually care enough to find out. I think there's enough classics in the world that I have true interest in than going to try out Ernest Hemingway and probably not enjoying it. Into the Dim by Janet B. Taylor. This is another art copy that I won when I was a book blogger back in the day. It is a science fiction fantasy time travel book, and it's got Arctic tones to it as well, so it's like a polar fantasy sci-fi. Actually sounds pretty good, but I was looking into reviews of this, also a review recently by a book blogger that I really like, and it just seems like an okay middle of the road read, and I don't really want to keep books on my TBR that I think are going to be okay middle of the road reads. I want books on my TBR that I'm predicting I will give 4 or 5 stars to. So because I have such a low prediction for it, I think I'm just going to let it go, and I think somebody else could enjoy this more. Forgive Me, Leonard Peacock was a book that I read last month and really didn't enjoy for a number of reasons that would spoil the plot, but one of them is the use of language that I found a bit offensive, and also none of the characters are realistic and everything felt very flat for me. I'm also going to be getting rid of Love, Hate and Other Filters by Samira Ahmed, which I didn't particularly like either. Young adult contemporary with a very big love triangle that takes up 75% of the book that I absolutely did not care about. And while it does tackle Islamophobia, it only does that at the very end. What it says is incredibly valid about Islamophobia. Ember Queen by Laura Sebastien was sent to me unsolicited when I was in Australia, and it's the third and final book in a trilogy. I think the Ash Princess trilogy, and I don't have that much interest in reading the trilogy, and it was unsolicited, so I'm just going to try and pass this one on to someone who could like it more. It's a finished copy, so I think that won't be too difficult to do. All of This Is True by Ligia de Peñaflor. Again, another one that I read last month, and I found all of the characters in this one so annoying. The storyline itself is good, so I think it's worth other people trying, but I couldn't get past the characters being annoying. Just in Case by Meg Rosoff, last month read. It was not a bad read by any means. I felt it was middle of the road and just okay. However, it's not one that I got a lot from. I didn't get many meaningful messages from it, and I don't feel a need to hold on to this book. Then we have Control by Lydia Kang, one from back in my blogger days. And this one, I think it's like my sister gets kidnapped. I've got to rescue my sister. Along the way, I find teenagers or like people who shouldn't really exist, who are like me, and something with the government. I'm guessing, I just glanced at the back because I had no memory of what this one is about, and I feel like because it's been on my TBR for so long and I still haven't picked it up, you know, when am I actually going to pick it up? When am I actually going to be pulled to read it? And that's why I decided to let go of it. We've got Rise Up by Stormzy. I went to an event where Stormzy was, you know, part of the event, the main part of the event, let's say, and because of that I got this book for free for going to that event. Everybody who went to that event got this book for free, and I just don't think I'm going to read it because, you know, it's not even just written by Stormzy, it's written by Stormzy's crew and all of the people around him. And while I do find it sometimes interesting to hear about people's creative processes in the creative industry, I actually prefer to do that via audiobook, like I did with Sounds Like Me by Sarah Bareilles recently. So I think I might do that for this one if I get around to it, but it's not really high priority on my list of books to read at all. The Betel Nut Tree Mystery, which is a murder mystery, I believe, that is set in Singapore, and I did want to read like a Singaporean setting, which is the original reason why I got this one, but it's just not been pulling my fancy and I'm not that interested in it anymore, so I'm going to let it go. If I Forget You by Thomas Christopher Green. This was actually on my 30 books in 30 days reading list. I made like a personal TBR but didn't share it with booktubes that I would actually, be more likely to get through it. But I opened the book and then I was like, I really don't want to read this. Even though it's short, I opened the book and I didn't want to read it, and I thought that's good grounds for unhauling something. If you open the book and think I'm only reading this because I own it, then it's a problem. It means you shouldn't own it. And now I won't, because I'm unhauling it. Last but not least, we have De Verboden Rivier by Ngozi Obioma, and this is one that I bought a long time ago when I was a teenager from Action. If you're Dutch, you'll know what Action is, and this translates as The Forbidden River. And I think when I bought this, it was for my plan, my mission of reading more Dutch books, because Action, you know, it was very cheap, like €1. But I didn't know at the time that this author doesn't originally write in Dutch. This author writes in English, I think. And I've seen some of his books in English, such as The Fisherman, which I know is very popular. And I don't want to read books in Dutch that are just translated from English unless I've read them in English before, such as, you know, reading The Hunger Games in Dutch. I wouldn't mind doing that to improve my Dutch. But I've never read this one before, and it's literary fiction, so I'm just gonna let it go. And there you have it. Those are all 35 books that I'm unhauling. I know I didn't unhaul recently, but I want to keep these unhauls regularly, keep my bookshelves fluid. Books I don't like coming out, books I like coming in. I've got a haul that I posted recently, so I've definitely replaced these 35 already. Please let me know in the comment section down below what is a book you've recently unhauled or you plan to unhaul soon. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, hit the subscribe button if you want to see more, and don't forget to hit that notification bell to be updated every time I have a new video. And you know what they say, onwards and upwards. Excelsior!